Hi, I'm Liv and welcome back to the Book Nook. So I don't quite know what's gone on with the lighting and the colouring of everything today. I've fiddled with some settings and it's all gone weird, so sorry about that. So for today's video, I'm going to do a Femmeuary Part 1 wrap-up and a revised TBR. That's what's happening. First up, I just want to say a really quick thank you to everybody for all the lovely comments on my last couple of videos where I was having a bit of a sort of wobble of content, and to the giveaway one. Just a reminder as well, you still have until the 19th of February to enter the giveaway if you so wish. Just comment on the giveaway video, which I will link in the thingy, Bob. Still can't get my words right. Comment on that video with your favourite either guilty pleasure book or, because I don't really like that term, just a book that you don't often get to talk about that you love for whatever reason. So just comment on that video, which I will link down below. Sorry that I haven't been so good at replying to comments. I have seen them all. They are all lovely. You're all lovely people. I've just been so mad I haven't had the chance to sort of sit down and actually reply to them with anything more than like, thank you, which would just sound really insincere and really repetitive. So I am going to sit down and comment on those soon. So things have been really busy at work with Love Your Bookshop Week, which has kind of been like my little baby, and I'm really pleased to see how it's going. We've had lots of people filling out these little slips saying why they love their bookshop, yeah, it's just gone really, really nicely. And tonight is the big book lovers quiz, so I am filming this in the morning and then I'm going into work to get ready for that. I'm hosting the quiz. All the questions are finished. I used my parents as a kind of guinea pig test subjects last night and it went quite well, so I'm really, really excited for that, so I shall let you know how that goes. But on with the video! So let's do the wrap-up bit first. First of all is the only book that is not really sort of Femmeuary, or it's only Femmeuary because it's a book that I, a lady, doth love. And that is George Saunders' Lincoln in the Bardo. Paperback came out and I had to reread it. I am so pleased to say that I love it just as much this time round as the first time round, if not a little bit more, because you sort of remember bits are coming and I'd forgotten bits, and oh, it's just gorgeous. For those of you who have somehow missed me banging on about this one, George Saunders is an American writer who has written primarily short stories, and his short stories are brilliant, and this is his first novel, which is a novelisation of Abraham Lincoln's son Willie, who died when he was 8 years old, and it essentially follows Willie as he is interned in a graveyard. That's entirely different. Interred in a graveyard, and follows his sort of acceptance of the fact that he is dead, and it talks with a lot of characters who are in this graveyard, and then Abraham Lincoln comes to visit his son, and essentially, I've said this on one of my little quote boards for the display that I did at work, but for a book about the dead, it is so full of life. It is just astonishing. It is beautifully written, it is moving, it is magical, it is linguistically incredible, and I urge you all to read it. I know a lot of people are kind of a little bit, not scared, or just a little bit put off by the fact that it's set out a little bit like a play script, and it is all sort of speech, but it's descriptive speech as well, and it is a bit wanky. It is one of those, like, it won the Man Booker, it's quite sort of literary, and it is a bit wanky, but that's why I love it. There's just something about it that is so magical. So yeah, I love this one, and I'm going to shut up about it now, but I think you should all go read it. Now, on to Femmeuary books proper. So I had a bit of a slow start to Femmeuary, just to February in general. Everything was going a little bit slowly, but I did manage to read Peach by Emma Glass. I will say I wasn't sure what I was expecting with this one, and I wasn't expecting what I got, if that makes sense. All you know about this is that there's a sort of teenage girl, young woman called Peach, who has obviously been attacked in some way, and she comes home and has to sort of hide that, and then it's her dealing with that, and it is very, very unflinching. Quite raw, quite brutal. It's also like really weird. All the characters are kind of a blend of like never say it, you know what I mean. So Peach is like a peach, and then she has a boyfriend called Green who is like a tree, and then there's a potato, and her baby brother or sister, I can't remember now, is a jelly baby, and so it's all sort of weird and magical like that, but then it is quite brutal and unflinching and sort of uncomfortable in the ways that it's supposed to be uncomfortable. Essentially, Peach has been sexually assaulted, and it is very, very uncomfortable. It is bizarre in the way it's written. It's beautifully written, I think, really strong, as I say, that rawness that comes through I really, really enjoyed. But it is one that I haven't sort of fully made up my mind on yet, because it's just so strange, but I would say it's worth reading. It's a slim little novel, it won't take you long, just in terms of for the writing, because it is beautifully done, but yeah, bit of a weird one, this one. Then I read Anatomy of a Scandal by Sarah Vaughan. So this is a book essentially about a bit of a sex scandal in Westminster. Now I remember a while ago, Sarah Vaughan is actually originally from Devon, and she actually came into our bookshop late last year with a proof copy of the book to talk to us about doing an event when it came out. So it was one that she had written a while ago, and then obviously the sex sex scandal in Westminster hit. So it's quite timely, and what it does more than just a sex scandal is then there are issues around consent and power and truth and who do you believe and what do you believe consent is, and it is really well done. I will say, like, you can tell it's a debut in terms of the writing, but that's not to knock it. It is really well crafted. The characters in there they're not two-dimensional. They grapple with a lot of these issues themselves, sort of husbands and wives grappling with the issues and how consent shapes their marriage and who do they believe and how far do you believe what the truth is? I'm not making any sense. So it's really well crafted, really interesting, really timely, very, very important in terms of the conversations around consent and power. I think this one and Erin Kelly's He Said, She Said are a really good sort of pairing for crime novels that deal with how sexual assault is written about, how it is perceived, and how the criminal justice system deals with it. That's the thing, this one is more of a sort of courtroom procedural than He Said, She Said, so it gives that sort of side to it, but a really, really good book, this one, that I would thoroughly recommend if you are looking to read more books that deal with consent and power and how that is all portrayed. Then I decided I would read Anne Garatta's Not One Day, which is a sort of semi-fictionalised, semi-not fictionalised account of all the past lovers that Anne Garatta has had, and it's a really strange one, this one. Anne Garatta is obviously someone who's very intelligent, and that comes through in her writing. I will say occasionally it sort of went off in tangents that I couldn't stay with. The tangents went off and kind of left me going, huh, what? Oh, and now we're back to the ladies. But that in itself is part of the nature of this writing. There is a foreword at the beginning where Anne Garatta says that she sets out to write these sort of snippets about desire and about women that she has either desired or have desired her throughout her life, but she's doing it as a sort of stream of consciousness thing. There's not going to be sort of really tight editing, it's just going to go where it's going to go. And then with the afterword, we find out that one of the excerpts in there is actually fictionalised, and it doesn't tell us which one. In terms of how the actual makeup of it is crafted, it's quite interesting, and I could see lots of sort of essays being written on this one, not necessarily by me, I don't have the time, but it's a really interesting one in terms of truth and authorship and reliability and things like that that are always really fascinating to talk about in fiction. And this is an interesting one because, as I say, it's in the fiction section, but it's also not fiction, so it's a really, really interesting look at truth and ownership and desire. Some of the bits in there are utterly beautiful. Some of them, as I say, the writing is quite dense and it kind of lost me. But yeah, really, really interesting experimental little one, this one. Then I decided I would have a little blitz of poetry on my day off the other day. So first of all, I read Holly McNeish's Plum. This is a book that I've been meaning to read for ages, and I thought, if not now, when? Because recently there have been a few articles that have been sort of looking at the, what's the word I'm looking for? The accessibility of poetry and whether or not that's a good thing, and whether poetry should be sort of very dense and esoteric, or whether it should be more accessible and more of a spoken word sort of slant. And obviously Holly McNeish has a spoken word background, and she's absolutely fantastic, and I think all of this conversation is kind of a bit of stuff and nonsense, but also quite important, but also really not important if you're really, you know, getting down to nitty-gritty. But I did think a lot of the criticism, for want of a better word, that was levelled at Holly McNeish, either sort of blatantly or, you know, thinly veiled, was utterly, utterly nonsensical, and this collection is just brilliant. What I love about this collection is it's a collection about growing up, and she intersperses poems written now with poems written sort of through her teenage years and some younger, and then she writes some poems in response to that, and there are some contextual notes on some of the poems she wrote when she was younger, and I just think it's a really interesting look at the growth of a poet, the growth of a woman, and the changes that that brings through language, through interpretation, through perception, and it's just really interesting. And someone who used to write sort of little scraps of poetry the whole way through growing up, it is really interesting looking at the sort of evolution of language and how you think and how you sort of express yourself throughout the years, and what poetry becomes to mean, whether it's a means of self-expression or outward expression inwards to be then reflected back out. It's just such an interesting look, and some of these are really funny, and that's the thing that I think poetry just, it has the ability to do that people don't utilise more, and I think one of my favourite ones in here, Bottom, it slipped out like silk, no pushing, paper spotless, the perfect ghost poo. But it does have a lot more substance than just poo, I will point out. As a poetry collection that deals with being a woman as well, it is incredibly important. There are themes in there to do with sort of sexual assault and sexual ownership and your body and how it is perceived by other people, and it's just an absolutely fascinating poetry collection. Really, I got confused between fantastic or fascinating then, so it came out as Fantastinating, which I think I've used before, but we're going to go with, so it's a Fantastinatic, no. It's a really good poetry collection, guys, and I really think you should read it. Then next up on my little poetry blitz was Deborah Levy's An Amorous Discourse in the Suburbs of Hell, which is kind of like a little conversational poem about a man and a woman, but the woman is kind of an angel that has either fallen from grace to earth or has been sent down to earth, and you're not quite sure. It's a brief little one. It's quite sort of pacey and experimental. It reminded me of Anne Carson's Red Doc, which I think is possibly intentional, possibly not, I don't know, but it was, I called it like a spicy little Anne Carson. It's just like this little whoo. Again, it's one that's funny. It's this relationship that sort of disintegrates and comes in fits and starts, and how much do they need each other. So really interesting little one, published by And Other Stories, and it's this gorgeous little hardback. And it looks at sort of suburbia and gentrification somehow in there as well. It does a lot for a little poetry collection. It's not a collection, it's a poetry conversation. So yeah, well worth a read. Then finally I read Vanessa Kisule's A Recipe for Sorcery. You may remember me talking about discovering Vanessa Kisule through the Guilty Feminist podcast, but then I actually realised through a conversation with somebody at work the other day that I did know Vanessa Kisule before the Guilty Feminist. It just hadn't sort of twigged, because Vanessa Kisule wrote the poem Take Up Space, which is one of the ones that was done through for Women That Spit, a collection of sort of poetry videos on the BBC a little while back, and it's an incredible poem, and it's in here. I will link down below to the video of it as well, because it's just so beautifully done. And this is a collection that again is about being a woman, particularly some of the poems deal with being a black woman, and it's just so powerful and so incisive and so insightful. Again, it's funny, it's fresh, it's cutting, it's just absolutely fantastic. One of the best poetry collections I've read so far this year, and I have actually read a few more this year, so I feel a little bit more qualified to say that than last year where I only read 3 throughout the year, whereas, you know, I've read 3 in a day this so far this year, and a few others, and it is just absolutely fantastic. So I urge you to go out and get a copy of A Recipe for Sorcery by Vanessa Kisule. It is one that will just stay with you, and again, it's one of these ones where it's got really good long poems, but really good little short one that I think will stay with you, and is really good. Mantra: if it doesn't feel better after a wank and a biscuit, reassess. Now I'm going to talk about what I'm reading at the moment. So as I say, I had quite a slow start to February in terms of reading, which was mainly taken up with rereading George Saunders. Then I kind of properly got started on February, Femmeuary, when I had a few days off and was able to read quite a few. And now I have started 2 books that I'm sort of flitting between. The first is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. Now this is one that wasn't on my TBR originally, but I was doing that thing that I often do where I'm bored and just need 5 minutes and I'm just going through my bookshelves, and I remembered I had a copy of this one, and I was like, well, it's Femmeuary and it's also Black History Month, and this is one I've been meaning to read for ages. Why was this not on my TBR? So I've picked this up and I'm just over halfway now, and it is the story of Henrietta Lacks, who in the 1950s, I believe, I've already forgotten, memory for numbers is bad and dates bad, she had cervical cancer, and while she was in hospital being essentially not really treated because there was nothing they could do for her, some of her cells were taken from her and used in cell cultures, and essentially those cells are now sort of immortal, and they survive even now in scientific research, and they became sort of some of the most famous cells throughout science. But it deals with the fact that Henrietta Lacks didn't know this was happening, her family didn't know anything about it for years, and the miscommunication between the scientific community and the importance of Henrietta Lacks and her family. You know, these are cells that are now, you know, have made millions and millions of dollars for various people, yet Henrietta Lacks' family still can't get health insurance and are still on the poverty line. And it's, so far, it's really, really interesting in terms of it looks at the history of medicine and the black community, and how there were experiments done on the black community, and the miscommunication after those kind of experiments were obviously, nope, you don't do that, but the miscommunication that followed from that. And it's just absolutely fascinating so far. The way it's written as well is not too dry a book. Rebecca Skloot, I believe, is herself a scientist, so it came from a sort of scientific background to begin with, because she'd heard about these cells, and then she became interested in the story of the woman behind those cells. And I'm finding it incredibly moving so far. As I say, not too dry. It's keeping the human element, because the human element is essentially what has always been missing from the story of HeLa, or the Henrietta Lacks cells, which are known as HeLa. So yeah, thoroughly recommend this one. I've heard so much about this from so many people that it's faintly ridiculous I haven't got around to reading it so far. So yeah, just over halfway through this one so far. Thoroughly enjoying it. Again, enjoying is not the right word. I'm finding it incredibly eye-opening. If you have read this one, let me know what you thought of it. And yeah, so this one I am going to finish soon, I think. And then I've also started reading Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. So the other night I could not sleep. I had left A Mortal Life of Henrietta Lacks downstairs, and if I got up I would have woken the cat up, and that would have been a whole thing. So on my bookshelves upstairs I had this one, and I thought, okay, I'm going to sit and read a bit of this. And it's been a while since I've read any Virginia Woolf, and I think, to be honest with you, I have only read To the Lighthouse. I think I've read a bit of... No, I have read The Waves as well, but it hasn't stuck in my mind as much. And I had forgotten how much I love her writing. It is quite dense, because she's an incredibly intelligent woman, or was, I should say, incredibly intelligent. So her writing is incredibly intelligent. So it is quite dense, but it's just so beautiful. There's this quality to it that you just don't get nowadays. But actually, having said that, there has been a real glut recently, which is wonderful to see, of writing by women that is intelligent and goes, you know what, I'm smart, deal with it. And that is what it sort of reminded me of, sort of reading a bit of this again, is this intelligence, unabashed intelligence. I am smart, I know how to write, you're going to read it and it's going to be good. So of course A Room of One's Own is Virginia Woolf's book that began as a couple of lectures that she gave, basically talking about women and creativity and writing, and that whole notion of why women couldn't have written War and Peace and things like that. So I'm not very far into it, I must admit, but again, her writing is just utterly transportive. Transportive? That's not a word, is it? Transportative? Transporting? You know what I mean though, right? Okay, yeah. I thought, as it's Femmeuary, and it is 100 years since some women were given the right to vote, it's a timely one to read, and I'm really glad that I picked this one up from my bookshelves when I couldn't sleep, because I'm thoroughly enjoying it so far. So this is my kind of revised TBR for the second half of Femmeuary, and for the last half of the month I should have a bit more time to actually sit and read some of these, so I'm just going to go through my revised TBR. So first of all, I need to get a bloody wiggle on with my yob pick for Femmeuary, which is Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood, overwhelmingly chosen by you lot out of the two Margaret Atwoods that I was torn between for this month, but I've started it like once and had a false start and then picked up some other things, so I need to get a wiggle on with this one. Another one that I've kept on my TBR list is The Book of Joan by Lydia Yuknovich. This one is one that I'm very, very excited about, and Naomi Frisby at Frisbot on Twitter, who is someone whose opinion on books by female writers I very much trust, has said that this is a potential book of the year for her, so I'm so even more excited about this than I already was. This is a retelling of Joan of Arc, and very, very excited. Then I also need to restart The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. I started this, but I actually literally only got as far as reading the two different introductions. There's one by Ursula Le Guin and one by China Miéville. I read those, and I think actually the first page of the actual novel itself. Then I left this one at work and started another book, and then read like 3 other books, and then actually retrieved this one and haven't actually had a chance to start it yet. But I do really want to read this one during Femmeuary, so I'm hoping to get around to this one. I also need to restart or get back into Mayhem and Death by Helen McClory. I've read the first little short story in this one, which is called Souterrain, and I need to get on with the rest of these because they're short little ones that are just so my kind of thing, and I've been really excited about this one, so I'm going to get back on that one. Final one that is staying on my TBR is Juno Dawson's The Gender Games. The paperback of this has actually come out this month. It's a really pretty paperback, but the hardback is even lovelier, so I'm hoping to spend some time with this one towards the end of the month when I've got a little stretch off work, so this is a very, very important one to my Femmeuary reading that I definitely do want to read. And then 2 that I have added to my TBR, another one that Naomi Frisby has been raving about, and also Eric Carl Anderson over at Lonesome Reader, is Sight by Jessie Greengrass. This gorgeous, gorgeous cover. So this one is bumping up my list quite quickly to try and read this one this month. And the final one that I've added to this month's TBR that I'm hoping to get around to is Reniado Lodge's Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. So this is one that I have been meaning to get around to for a long time, and you can see how long ago I got it. This is when it was long listed for the Baillie Gifford Prize, and it since went on to win that. that. So yeah, this has been sitting on my shelf for far too long, so I'm going to try and get around to that one. So yeah, a few that have stayed on my TBR, a few that I have added, a few have gone off my TBR. It's really frustrating for me that Femmeuary is such an important sort of idea, an important thing to do, and I really wanted to be able to go properly on it, do some properly themed videos for it, and really get more involved than I have been, but it has just been a really busy really busy month at work, so it's just been sort of bad timing for me personally to properly get involved in it. It's just been so good to see so many people getting involved through the hashtag, through videos, through their reading, and just a general consciousness of female writers and writing about women as well. So remember, again, you have until the 19th, which is the Monday, and I will link down below to the video on which you will need to comment if you would like to enter the giveaway. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're having a good bookish Femmeuary. Have a little chat with me in the comments down below, and I shall see you next time. Bye-bye.